Awesome. Yeah, so let's get started. So, hi everyone. Thank you so much for joining our virtual hangout with the Women in Product community. My name is Lingling Chen. I'm a product marketer in the Bay Area, and I'm a long time member of this wonderful community since 2017. So just to give you some background about this virtual hangout series, we started in March, just when the pandemic hit, and we really wanted to provide a platform for the community to hang out in a very casual way and stay connected and support each other. We have done probably 9 or 10, and some of them are recorded. If you search YouTube Women in Product, you can find some of our previous series. Today, we have the great pleasure and honor to have Deborah Liu. So Deb is the co-founder and board president of Women in Product. She's also vice president marketplace at Facebook. So a lot of you probably have used marketplace, so buy things. It's really one of the fastest growing products at Facebook. So today our theme is building confidence and embracing your authentic self. So we will start with Deborah's career journey, and then we will talk about this theme in a little bit. Hi, Deb.
Hi, it's nice to join all of you this evening.
Yeah, awesome. Before we start with our first question, we actually have a few community announcements. So our Women in Product annual conference, the tickets will be going on September 9th. So pay attention to community announcements. There are also volunteer and scholarship opportunities if you want to, get involved with the community in a more meaningful way. And then Rachel from the SF office is dropping some links in our chat room. And also during this virtual hangout, feel free to ask questions in the chat room, and I may stop later to call your name and have you on mute if you're comfortable asking questions and showing your face. And also this session will be recorded. Awesome. Deb, let's get started. So Deb, you have so many amazing career accomplishments along the way. Can you share with us, first of all, your career journey briefly, how you got to where you are today?
Hope you're muted, Deb.
Yeah, Deb, you're on mute.
Sorry, I apologize. I started my career journey in tech actually when I was graduating from Stanford Graduate School of Business. I was getting my MBA, and I really wasn't sure what I wanted to do. And so I stopped at a career fair, and there was a table there for PayPal, which was this tiny startup, which nobody had ever heard of, but I was an eBay seller, so I knew who they were. And I stopped by and I said, I just love your product. It's so amazing. Here's all the stuff you should build. And they said, do you want to come interview? And I thought, not really. I'm actually moving back to North Carolina, so no, thank you. And they said, no, come on, why don't you come see our offices? And I thought, well, free trip to see their offices, why not? So I went the next day to actually meet with PayPal, and I ended up joining. And I actually became a product manager on accident also, because when I was talking to Tim Wenzel, he recruited a lot of the PayPal mafia. He said, well, we have jobs in marketing and we have jobs in product. What do you prefer? And I had taken a marketing class. I had no idea what a product manager did. And I saw Catherine Wu, who heads up social good at Airbnb now. She was sitting there at the table, and she was a classmate of mine, and she had graduated a year earlier. And I said, what do you do? She said, I'm in product. I'm like, that sounds good. And so I showed up to my interviews, and the rest is history. I'm a product manager and a product leader, and I've built products across many different companies over many, many years. Some really interesting, iconic products. I worked on the eBay PayPal integration, because a couple weeks later, we were bought by eBay, and they needed someone to lead the integration, and so I worked on that. I ended up working on charity and social commerce at PayPal. I eventually went to eBay to lead the buyer experience. I came to Facebook, and I helped create the games team. I worked on Facebook credits and payments. I led payments for about 10 of the 11 years I've been here. I built the audience network, built marketplace. I helped seed Instagram shopping and WhatsApp payments, Facebook Pay. So a lot of really cool products along the way. And now we're working on marketplace and shops, and it's pretty exciting.
Wow, that's awesome. So as a new mom, I love the marketplace. I just love exploring secondhand products there. Can you share with us how this product was conceptualized and what are some of the unique challenges in managing Facebook Marketplace?
Well, when I started at Facebook, I really, really wanted to work on Marketplace. I wanted to do social commerce, and I felt like there was such an opportunity there. And I spent 5 years actually working on other products. I ran a bunch of other teams. I built lots of products from 0 to 1, then on. And I kept coming back every year. We should do commerce. We should do commerce. And about 5 years ago, I finally convinced Mark to let us do it. And we started it. And it was a disaster. We had the wrong approach. We had the wrong execution. The first couple of years were terrible. We finally launched the Marketplace tab, and it was full of fraud. I think the headline on the first day was on the New York Times, something like "Drugs, Guns, and Baby Hedgehogs: A Story of a Marketplace Gone Wrong," on the day of our launch. So you can imagine, and this headline is still there if you go to the archives. It was in October of, I think, 2016. And so if you think about the story of success is not linear, right? It's not easy. And I think often we think success is a simple thing, but it's not. And so, if you look at success over the long term, it's really about building things and building value over a long period of time. But I say that, people built Marketplace. We actually started with mom groups where a lot of mom groups would actually create sale group versions of themselves. We have Palo Alto Moms, I live in Palo Alto, and then there's Palo Alto Mom Sales, right? Most mom groups actually branch off because you have so much stuff when you have a kid, and that stuff they outgrow really fast. And so they actually created mini marketplaces for themselves, and eventually, because I was a mom, I could see it. The funny part was that I would tell people, no, I buy and sell stuff on Marketplace and basically the groups all the time. And people were like, what are you buying on Facebook? And I'm like, a ton of stuff. And I realized that a lot of my colleagues are single men or without kids, for example. And so they didn't see the opportunity. And so sometimes, who you are and in your point of view is really special because of what you can see that other people don't see.
That's amazing. When that article come up, what was it like? It must be like in panicking mode. And how was the company's reaction? And I'm quite happy that they didn't just stop the project.
Well, we had a big launch, and actually what happened was there was a bug where our integrity filters failed the day we launched. We literally launched and everything just went on site. Like there was no checks on it for that day. And we couldn't figure out, it turns out there was a bug that was coded in there. We fixed it, but it did take us a long time actually to figure out the kinds of attacks we would end up with. And so fraud was a huge issue, counterfeits was a huge issue, and we had to get that all under control. But it was pretty devastating to work towards a launch that hard and to realize on day one, it's a failure. But actually resilience is really important too. In any innovation, it's going to take time, and you can't just expect something to launch and be successful. Most of the products I've ever built took years to be successful. And I think often we just wish we could just turn on the light and it's successful. And that's rarely the case.
Mm-hmm. I'm already seeing some great questions coming in. Hi, Lisa. Lisa, you have a question. Do you mind unmuting yourself and ask here?
Yeah. Hi, everyone. Hi, Deb. Hi, Lingling. My name is Lisa, and I have a question. Could you walk us through how did the first 2 weeks, of COVID unfold for you and your team at Facebook?
Yeah. So imagine that you have a product where people meet up face-to-face to buy stuff from each other. And the country is slowly rolling into lockdown. What do you do? And at the same time, people are selling masks, N95 masks, at high prices that are now unavailable to emergency personnel because they're pulling off the market to sell it on marketplaces. The hand sanitizer is going for hundreds of dollars for a box. And you have to make a lot of decisions really, really fast. I mean, that's where we were. We went into lockdown and we thought, okay, what does this mean for our products? Because it's literally a physical meetup product in a time when people were encouraged never to see each other. And so our team had to pivot really hard in actually 3 different ways. So one was on the integrity side, we actually, we took down all listings that were, because for a bunch of reasons, we were really worried about, for example, people making money reselling masks on Marketplace and actually making it unavailable to essential workers. And so we banned masks immediately. We also banned a lot of products that we were concerned about, sort of like hand sanitizers, where price inflation could actually make those products unavailable. But I mean, these are hard choices, right? Because we're going to make mistakes. People are going to be upset. People who need those products can't get access to them. But we also were very worried about actually the supply and demand, pulling demand into marketplace as opposed to the demand into essential workers was going to be really damaging. And those are the kinds of things that, so we ended up banning categories of products, and then eventually we actually opened back up. We don't allow N95 masks, but I think we allow, like, you know, homemade masks, for example, or masks that are not kind of reserved for essential workers. But these are really hard choices, and we pivoted hard on that first because it was just craziness, right? Second is we had to really figure out, like, what are we going to do in a product where people are actually physically meeting up? So we quickly launched something we called porch pickup, even if you don't have a porch, but basically contactless pickup. So we launched something where you can just mark yourself as saying, I want distance pickup. And, you know, by the way, when we went into lockdown, the numbers went down significantly because everybody was in lockdown. And so we were really concerned about that as well. The other thing we did was, the third thing we did was we actually turned off all promotional channels because people said, hey, you know, you're showing people products that they can pick up, but do you really want to do that during this time? So we actually turned off most of our promotional channels as well. And so, you know, at first it was really damaging to our product. It was actually pretty hard on the numbers. The team was working so hard just to keep things off the site that weren't meant to be there. And then we saw something really interesting happen a couple months later. It completely bounced back, V-shaped recovery. So it went down, like just steeply down, and then it went steeply straight back up. And we didn't turn back on the promotional channels. And so we couldn't figure out exactly what was going on, because one day it was like it bottomed out, and then the next day it just started growing again. And we hit all-time highs actually a couple months later. And we couldn't, you know, at first we're like, okay, there are no promotional channels. We have removed all these items. We've done all these things. But then we realized that people needed access to these products really badly, that people needed to make money. And that people, you know, like every store was out of bicycles, for example, but, you know, people need to get places. And so we saw like desks become really popular because people were working from home. So a lot of like desks, chairs became really popular, bicycles. And so we actually started seeing the evolution of moving, of like what people's lives needed, and it all bounced back against those. We also saw as people moved, you know, there were just less accessibility to other channels to buy new furniture, for example, and other things. And so people would buy and sell from each other, but people still had to move. They still were leaving school. They were still doing all these things. And so Marketplace actually became a huge outlet for a lot of local communities to connect with each other at a time when people were helping one another. So it turned out to be a very resilient product, but probably not in the way we expected.
Yeah, just want to quickly comment. I went to IKEA in East Palo Alto like this last weekend. It was like Disneyland. Like I asked the staff member, it will take like an hour just to get in. So yeah, I see what you're saying on like the access to, like, you know, furniture and stuff. Mm-hmm. Thank you for your answer.
Yeah, absolutely.
Ophir, is that how I pronounce your name? I'm so sorry.
It's Ophir.
Ophir. Yeah. Ask your question here.
Thank you, Lingling. Hi, Deb. I can really relate. My first interaction, like, I obviously knew about the marketplace, but the first time I actually sold was during COVID, because it was the only place to have the communication. My question kind of relates to the topic for today about confidence and your stories about early failure with products and ideas and taking risks. And in a way, I see a tension between the amount of failure that actually needed for innovation and confidence and feeling confident in what you do at work, like as an individual, not only like on a team level. And I was wondering if you have any thoughts on that on the individual level and not only the organizational, right? Because we always say that we need to celebrate failure. But as a product leader or a PM kind of like powering through a failure, would love to hear your thoughts.
Sure. Well, there's two things. So one thing is you're actually asking for any new product, the probability of success is way less than 50%. Like even in a company where you have all the distribution, you have access to channels, you have unlimited budgets for marketing, even if you just had everything right, most products have way less than a 50% probability of success. And it doesn't matter how many resources, because sometimes it's just not the right time. You might not have gone off to the right market. You might not have the right solution, and all of those things. And so the challenge with building new products, I think most of all, is that a lot of executive teams and companies just don't understand the math, which is you can do one of two things. You can never fail, in which case you never take risks either. And that's what happens is someone else eats your lunch someday, some startup comes along and eats your lunch, or you accept that there's 50% failure or more, and that you have to reward teams to keep doing it. But if you, every time something fails, you're like, okay, that person was terrible, we're gonna fire them. Imagine if anyone would ever take risks in your company again. And so having a risk-seeking culture means that you have a lot of outside successes. I mean, Marketplace, Watch, a lot of the products that are very iconic, it was just a small team that said, hey, I want to do this thing. And, you know, it started out with like a handful of people. And so that's the thing I think most people, especially leaders at companies, misunderstand is the culture they create is not whether or not, if you say I only reward success, then everyone's going to join the big product and just grow at 2%, right? Because, you know, you're rewarded for that, and it's a lot harder to fail at that. But if you say to any individual group of PMs, hey, by the way, half of you are going to be gone because you're going to fail, but a lot of it's exogenous factors, who's going to want to do that? And so I think a lot of it is cultural, first of all. So if you work on a project like this and you feel like you're at a company that doesn't support it, it's probably not the best thing for you. So either you find a company where success is actually defined as learning fast and moving fast, as opposed to just like hitting product market fit, when the reality is for every successful app in the App Store, think about how many teams out there were iterating on that same idea. 100, 1,000. And so I think the probability of success is to be calculated in times the value over time. And so if you think about that, then the question is, what are you contributing to the company? Are you contributing to the learning? Are you contributing to failing fast and understanding the market so you can move on? You know, those are all really important things, and redefining the failure, not as actually like not being able to ship the product, but a failure is failing to learn, failing to add to the information that the company has about the space so that they keep throwing bad money after good, right? And so I think we just need to redefine what success looks like in this industry so we can continue to encourage people to invest in innovation.
Deb, I like how you talk about redefining, which is related to my next question. You know, in a Fast Company article, you mentioned about this hack called framing or reframing. Can you share with us some examples of how we can frame certain things in a positive way and be more confident?
Yeah, so I remember I was doing a Q&A with the Asian Pacific group, the Asian Pacific Islander group. I'm the sponsor for the ERG, the Employee Resource Group. And somebody raised their hand and they said, well, I'm really bad at my self-review. So I have an internal post that everyone looks at during the time to do reviews, because I said, write your self-evaluation first. Because you're the only person who has that information. And so if you write all your peer reviews first and then you forget yours, you're the only person with the information on your self-review, so you should focus on that. And so she raised her hand and she said, well, I'm just not really good at self-promotion. And I stopped right there and I said, okay, if you define it as self-promotion, you've already lost. Because you're gonna write it in such a way that you're not gonna consider it self-promotion, and you're going to downplay your successes, you're going to highlight your faults. Instead, actually think about it in a different way. Reframe it as this, you know, I am not good at self-promotion, but I am good at explaining what I did. I'm good at educating other people about the value I added to the company. And if you just think about how you reframe that in such a small way, it actually changes your mind about how you think about something like a self-evaluation. And it's the same thing with imposter syndrome. You can say, look, I'm not the expert. And most of the time you're not gonna be. I mean, there's always someone who's better than us or smarter than us in most things that we do. But I said, like, I choose to leverage what it is, beginner's eyes. I built a lot of products in spaces I knew nothing about. So I built mobile app install ads. I've never done mobile. I've never done ads. I had no interest in doing the project, but I was kind of stuck doing it. Mm-hmm. And it became a multi-billion-dollar business. But, you know, it was because I went into the industry not understanding that the industry was actually filled with fraud, and there were a lot of bots and things like that, bot farms and things. But we built a very, very different product than everybody else because we didn't understand how the industry worked. And so use that as your superpower. Use your beginner eyes and say, hey, I'm looking at this problem in a different way. I'm not the expert, but I can learn faster than anybody else. And so really reframing the question actually helps you get past the imposter syndrome and helps you unlock the value that you have.
That's awesome. Wow, we have so many questions coming in. All right, Chrissy, are you here?
Yeah, hello.
Hey, please ask your question.
Sure. Yeah, this was like maybe 10 minutes ago when you were explaining the genesis of Marketplace. And I just thought that was a really cool story. But for like a product like Facebook, where, you know, I'm sure there's like a lot of various product ideas in there from like the people who use it, how do you essentially like decide which one to pick? And then adding on top of what you had talked about with like failure, like the initial launch was like, you know, a failure, and like how did you the product intuition to know that this was still worth trying and to keep pursuing it, and just change the approach versus like considering it like, okay, yeah, this experiment was like done and we learned stuff from it and maybe we can just table this for now?
Yeah, so I think in terms of sifting through ideas, so recently I launched a initiative around faith, because during COVID, a lot of houses of worship and churches and mosques cannot actually bring people together. And it was not something that I had thought to do, but we looked at some of the trends and we noticed that on Sundays and Wednesdays, we were seeing huge spikes in videos, live video in particular, and engagement. And so we were investigating it and we said, you know, this is the right time for this product, which is most faith organizations are physical meetup organizations. And they rely a lot on people walking through the door. And that's no longer an option in many, many places in the world. And so this is the right time for us to do something here. And so we pitched the idea and we pulled together a small team. Again, it's like 5-7 people right now, to say, how do we actually empower these, you know, houses of worship and faith organizations to actually come online at a time when they can't meet with their parishioners or, you know, the people that they really care about, and they want to build community. How do we actually create a virtual church or a virtual mosque or, you know, a virtual temple? And so that's really the North Star of the product. But that genesis came because of COVID. I don't think we would have worked on that had that not happened. But then we noticed that a lot of these organizations really don't know how to, because a lot of them are very, very traditional. They're run by, you know, it's like an older generation of people run most of the faith organizations in this country, and they're not very online, but they've had to like ramp up in 6 months in a way that they hadn't done in the last 15 years. And so it's been really fascinating to see what an opportunity is to have influence over, you know, building community online, which is not something you've ever done before. And so that's just an example of something new that we've started working on because it was the right time. And it was, you know, we saw the need, and a lot of us were very much connected with people asking us for help. So our church asked me for help, like, how do we get online? How does live work? You know, we're having a bug with this. And so, you know, that's actually how it started. It was a bunch of us that, you know what, we're getting a lot of requests for help. Why don't we build a product around this?
Okay. Cool, thank you.
Thank you. Ashley has a question related to working as a woman woman of color in product management and leadership. Ashley, please unmute yourself and ask the question here.
Hi. Yeah, so I was just wondering, because I'm also an Asian American woman and I am currently in college, and so I'm just trying to figure out how to, I guess, gain confidence in a place where, you know, if I'm not the most common face, I guess, and how to overcome any challenges either internally or if you actually have experienced any like people saying anything that was just, you know, an actual roadblock to your success, I guess.
Yeah, so let me tell you the micro and then the macro, okay? On the micro side, I don't think that anyone looked me in the eye and said, I'm not giving you this promotion because you're a woman or Asian. Okay, like no one's ever looked me in the eye and said that. And if you look at any individual like success or failure, I don't feel like I was treated specifically in a discriminatory way directly. But if you look at the stats in tech companies, 13% of the company are Asian women and 3% of the executives. So you tell me, statistically, unless Asian women are less qualified, less smart, less hardworking, or otherwise terrible in some way, tell me that that stat doesn't make sense, right? Like if you can explain to me why, as a group of people, Asian women do well in school, but do less well when it comes to climbing the corporate ladder, then I think that's a magical formula I like to understand. And so if you look at the macro statistics, that says something really interesting, right? And so recently I'm writing a book, and Lingling can tell you more about it, but I'm writing a book and I was doing some research, and it basically, there was a study that was done where Amazon had created a system to sort through resumes. And they sorted through resumes in order to, because you get like 10,000 resumes for these positions, and there was just like, it's very expensive to hire sourcers to review every resume. So they built a resume screening system to see if they could screen out people who were going to be successful at their company. But they ended up scrapping the project because they found out that there were a few flaws in it, two of which were, if you went to 2 women's colleges, you couldn't even get through the screening. And if you played women's sports of any type, you were actually penalized. Now, the algorithm, you could say, well, that's algorithmic bias, but actually all the algorithm did was take all the bias of 10 years of data and reveal it to the people who are screening this resume. And there was a guy who said he was evaluating a screening system similar to this, and he found out that the 2 most important factors in that resume screening system was being named Jared and having played lacrosse. Now, who names their kids Jared? Well, first you have to have a son, usually. Second is it's a type of name. It's very American, right? It's not, it's not a non-American name, for example. And playing lacrosse is actually something correlated with a certain class, a certain race, going to private school, those types of things, right? And so all of our just general biases are built into every hiring decision we make over long, long periods of time. And I don't think any individual person was discriminated against overtly. Like you couldn't tell, right? Someone didn't say, well, that guy's named Jared, he played lacrosse, so we should hire him. But what algorithms tell us over time is look for more patterns of things that we've already done for 10 years. And all this says is that it's not really about the hard discrimination when someone looks you in the eye and say you're not good enough. It's about how our system is built where these small things trip us up, but we don't see them. And so 10 years of data later, we realize that this is happening, but then what? It's hard. And so Ascend actually does a set of studies, if you haven't seen it, about Asians' representation in tech. And it is worse to be a woman in tech, and it's worse to be Asian than to not Asian, because there's actually a large population, so it's not a pipeline problem, it's actually a promotion problem. And so you're less likely to get promoted, and it's the very worst to be an Asian woman. But Asian women are represented in organizations, they just are not promoted at the same rates. I think it's very different for Hispanic and Black women who actually aren't even represented. So the data is fairly sparse there, and it's really difficult for them because they're not even represented. They're not even in the room. For Asians, it's really different. It's more, you're in the room, but you're never the leader.
Yeah. Thank you.
Awesome. So since Deb, you already mentioned your book, do you want to give us a sneak peek about the book and what's it about? What motivated you to write this book?
So I've done a lot of these talks over the years, and I realized I was repeating a lot of stories. So I thought I'd write it in a book because I get asked a lot of very similar questions, which is, I started writing the book, and it's basically called Take Your Power Back. And the premise in chapter 1 is it's an unlevel playing field. And it talks about all the reasons it's an unlevel playing field in the world that we live in. And so the book isn't here to solve systematic racism or unconscious bias, because those things will exist. The question then becomes, what do you do within it? I hope we can dismantle systematic racism. I hope we can make the world more fair. But we all are living in a world that's not going to change as fast as we hope over the next 5-10 years. And so this book is really, as a woman in particular, how do you navigate organizations? How do you not give your power away, as they say, each time there's an opportunity? How do you speak up for yourself while still being liked? What does it tell you? And so how do you build resilience? How do you build allies? And so I finished 3 of the chapters. The first one is on the unlevel playing field, which is probably the most depressing chapter. And it was meant to be depressing. I wrote at the end, this chapter was meant to depress you, and the rest of the book is meant to uplift you. So, but I did write about the chapter about allies, right? How do you find allies? And how do you surround yourself with people who are going to help you? So that talks about mentors and sponsors. It talks about your team, and it talks about your tribe. And so it helps you kind of find the people who are going to make your life a lot easier and actually support you. And then I wrote the chapter about forgiving yourself, because I think women are really, really hard on ourselves. It's forgiving others as well. People will hurt you. And the question is, the story I'll share from that chapter is, I was really upset at work about this guy would just say things to me. And it was like super insensitive. It wasn't like, it was rude and sensitive, not like, it wasn't discriminatory and sensitive. And he would interrupt me all the time. And I would just get so upset. And I would talk to my career coach. And she finally, one day I was complaining for the, I don't know, umpteenth time. And she said, when are you going to let go of the backpack? And I said, what do you mean? She said, every time he says something to you, you put a stone in your backpack and you carry it around. And he doesn't notice it. You're just carrying this extra weight. You've got to just let it go. And I realized something, which is that hurt and upsetness wasn't hurting him. It was hurting me. And so I just had to let it go. And I had to find peace with the fact that maybe I'm never going to change him. I mean, the story is, it ended up into a much better place. But I can't force a resolution. I can't force reconciliation. I can't change him. And so I can only change my own reaction to him. And I think a lot of times we just have this futile anger and upset, and yeah, it sucks. But at the same time, being willing to forgive and let go, both of mistakes that you made or someone who hurt you, that is probably one of the most freeing things you can do.
Wow, I see so many comments here. We all cannot wait to read it one day. Do you have an estimated timeline of when we can expect
I
it?
have to work with COVID. I'm doing like a page a day, so it might take me a whole year, but I'm working on it. But it's really important, because I think a lot of these stories are the journey of seeing women struggle so much, and then also seeing how already we're struggling with people who treat us lesser, or people who tell us we're bossy, or people who say we're not good enough. And then when we don't forgive ourselves and we don't help each other, that's way worse. And I found that women are, by the way, I did a section on queen bees, and that does not exist, by the way. That women do not treat other women worse, except in environments where men set it up, where it's a competition and there's only one winner and there's one woman. And so queen bee syndrome is a symptom of a hierarchical structure that only has place for one woman. But in organizations where there's places for multiple women, that actually doesn't happen. But then you see how people say, oh, women treat each other badly, right? Nobody ever says that about men. They compete all the
time. Okay. Swat, hey, are you here? I know you have a question earlier. Yeah, please unmute yourself and ask a question.
Thanks, Lingling. Thanks, Deb, for being here and sharing all of your amazing insights with us. I had a question about.
By the way, I think. Yeah.
Thank you. I had a question about picking a generalist route versus picking or becoming an expert in a domain. And I was specifically thinking about how you've moved from games to commerce payments to Facebook Marketplace, and you're doing really well at Facebook. I just want to understand your thoughts on, are there any implications of picking one route on growing within your career, within your function, and how do you approach it?
Sure. So, I started in payments and commerce, and then I did a whole bunch of different things for 5 years, and I came back to it. So I would say, here's the thing. I would first solve for what you're excited about. What gets you up in the morning? Because the thing that's going to excite you is you're going to bring that extra 20% energy, and you're going to do better. So I would ask people, in your job, what do you bring that's special that no one else brings? And for a lot of the areas I didn't know, I just said, look, I'm going to bring something which is, I'm going to work harder. I'm going to understand the market. I bring fresh eyes to this problem. Let's just see what happens. And for the things where I'm an expert, I'm like, what I bring is expertise. I bring a depth of knowledge. I bring a lot of contacts, and like, I think I can move this faster. And so I do think it depends on what you're going to learn and what part of your career you're in. The thing that I've always optimized for, and I hope that this is something you think about, is optimize for people and culture. Because you could join, so for example, let's say you join a company and there's a team, and this happens a lot when people join Facebook. So every generalist in the company who doesn't have a team actually reports to me in the tool. So I have like 100 reports at any given time. But a lot of people ask me, like, what should I optimize for? Because, there's so many cool things you could be working on. And I said, like, optimize for the team that you're going to be with and whether you're going to have a sponsor. because that's going to accelerate you more than anything else. If there's a team you enjoy working with, you're going to perform way better than a team that you just don't get along with or you just are neutral on. And the second thing is, does your manager, does your skip level manager believe in you? Because if that's the case, that's going to accelerate you way more than if you're the expert or not, or the new person. And to really find some place where you're excited about what you're doing and you have the backing. You know, if you look at acceleration in careers, it often happens because you have a sponsor. And I write a lot about this because, so I want you to, you can use a little raise hand button. It's blue over there on the right hand side. Raise your hand if you have a sponsor. So you can push a little button. I think that works, right? So how many hands are there? Can you see? It's a little. So let's see, I see 3 hands. Not a ton of hands. So here's the thing I would tell you, which is if you have a sponsor, and by the way, a lot of people tell me, well, how do you know? And I'm like, if you have to ask that question, you don't have one. Because a sponsor is someone who basically makes it known that you are going to they're going to spend time and make you successful. And I sponsor a lot of people. I've been sponsored a lot, and I write a lot about this because this is actually what accelerates men's careers. Women have lots of mentors, men have lots of sponsors, and who do you think is going to open doors to the next opportunity? And so sponsors are people who actually say, hey, there's an opportunity internally. I'd like Swati to try to work on this, right? Now, you know, you probably didn't even know about the opportunity, but let's say that, you know, a new work stream opens up. So for example, when we stepped out of Women in Product at Facebook, we went on to run the nonprofit and the organization. We actually asked 3 women internally to take over the organization, and each of us nominated someone in our place. Well, who do we nominate? People we know, who we thought were going to be really good at this. There were probably 50 women we didn't know. The problem was that, you know, we picked people we knew who we had worked with and trusted the organization to. And that's what happens, right? That was an assignment for them. It gave them an opportunity to try something totally different that they probably didn't know about. And we actually invited them to the role. So that's what happens when there's opportunities to try something new. Hey, do you want to go found a new office and spend 6 months ramping people up? Do you want to, you know, start this new product and hire the first team? Do you want to? But a lot of those opportunities are offered from the vice president or the director. And it's not like they do like a full interview slate and go, okay, of these 20 women or 20 people, who is the best person? They go, I think she could do this. Why don't we ask her if she's available? And because of those informal networks, that's the acceleration of your career. If you can do well in something like that, they're like, oh, I think she could try this other thing. Hey, this new role is open. But it actually accelerates you in a way that you don't even see. The hindsight is very easy. When you look at that, you're like, wow, I had this opportunity to work on this thing that no other kind of same level PM, no other senior PM in the org had a chance to do. And I had visibility into X and had a chance to present to Y, and I had a chance to talk about this. And you realize it's those small moments that accelerate your career in a different way.
Speaking of network, Deb, I want to go to our next question related to why you started Women in Product community, because I think you create a community to also want to provide a platform for people to try mentors and then sponsors. Can you give us some stories and the backgrounds of how the community was started?
Yeah, well, so the thing you should know about Women in Product is we started it mostly for us. So we were actually a group, I think at the time when we started it, it was like 2012, we would host these dinners and we would just invite other women we knew from the industry. And part of it was that Facebook had so few women PMs. I think there were 6 women PMs at the time when we started having dinner together. And we were like, there's only 6 of us, so we can't hang out together all the time. So we said, why don't we just go invite like 3 or 4, each of us were responsible for inviting 3 or 4 people we knew in the industry who would want to have dinner with us, who were women. And we're like, okay, how hard could this be, right? So we did this quarter after quarter for about 4 years. And we just kept doing these dinners. And again, we had 6 women PMs, and it was less than 10% of the population of PMs at Facebook at the time. And we just hosted these dinners. And then in year 3.5, we're like, wouldn't it be fun to do a conference? Because everyone's talking about going to Grace Hopper. And we were like, why don't we have a PM conference? We're like, we should do one. So random PMs that we had invited to dinner, and we didn't even, at that point, we didn't even know who was nominating. We were just like writing lists, and whoever to show up would show up. We're like, anybody want to create a conference? And a bunch of women are like, sure. And then we did a dinner again, and we hadn't made any progress. So I'm like, okay, ladies, like we said, we're going to do a conference. Anyone really in? And so a bunch of people said, sure, why not? And a lot of them are the women you see on our board. So Christine Lee, Ashita, Nisha, Yardley, Fiji, like a bunch of us just said, okay, we're just going to do this thing, see what happens. So then we started working on it, and it was crazy because we thought, how many women PMs could there possibly be? So we opened up registration. Facebook offered to host it. Cheryl was our first speaker, and we had about 250 seats, almost 300 seats, and it was something like 5,000 people applied. And we said, how is there even 5,000 women PMs who would be interested in coming to Facebook, like a location in Menlo Park? How are they even going to make it here? We have no idea what we're doing. And so one of the biggest challenges I think that we have is that, you know, as women, we just didn't know what we were doing, but that made it possible for us to think really big. And so then we started the Facebook group because we needed a place to announce that we're having a conference. And the Facebook group is now over 20,000 people, which is shocking. And then we said, you know, Seattle's like, we want to create our own chapter. And we're like, a chapter? Sure. And then New York said, no, we're going to be the biggest chapter. So New York started. And now I think we have 23, is that right, Rachel? 23 cities with chapter leads. And then we're actually forming kind of subgroups as well. So there's Black women product. And it's just been really exciting to see how, you know, because these are all community forums. So we don't go to a city and say, we're going to launch in X city. Actually, the cities come together and say, we're going to create the Boston chapter came from another organization. New York was actually formed by a group of women in New York who just said we wanted to work on this together. Now we have international chapters. I remember the first time an international city reached out to us and we're like, okay, what do we do? So we did London. And then we recently launched in India, which is exciting, a few months ago. And it's really exciting to kind of see the momentum. And so, you know, as you build a product, you never know what product market fit looks like. But this has been an amazing adventure.
That's awesome. How did this community change your, you know, career or personal network? Any stories you can share with us?
Well, I've just met such amazing people. You know what the funniest thing about doing the conference was, for a long time, we used to, so Ha is on the board as well. She's part of Spiro Ventures. And we used to vet every speaker ourselves. And I remember these like horrible stories going around where it's like, we would invite more women speakers, but there aren't any good women speakers. And we were like, that's crazy, right? Because I know a ton of great women product leaders, and you go to these conferences and all the panels are like men. And it's so depressing. And so one of the things we decided to do was, let's feature only women speakers. So all of our conferences are only women speakers, because we feel like there weren't enough opportunities for that. And we realized something. We would invite women to speak, and we said, look, the only criteria we have is that you have a video of you speaking. And a lot of the women we just really respected, so we're like, hey, come speak. And they said, well, I don't have a video. And I realized that is why the women say, well, I've never spoken outside of my own office. I'm like, a lot of the men like go on the circuit and like go really do this, but so few of the women did. And so then Ha and her friends and she invited me to be one of the judges, started a speaker series where we trained women, especially women, to speak. And then we give one of the slots in the conference to the winner of the speaker's idol, is what she calls it. And so Ha and I hosted this. So we've done it a couple times, and each year we have a speaker that shows up on stage. And it's been amazing. Like, what's really worked well is those speakers go on, they have a talk they created, they get feedback from professional coaches, they have a video created for them. And so you just see so much momentum around the idea of uplifting women. And so I just love the idea of seeing women support each other and to help grow each other. And so many people come to me and say, by the way, I found my job because of women in product, or I got help with interviews, or I found my mentor. And so it's really wonderful. I mean, a lot of times we do the work and we have no idea what people are doing on the actual platform because we just don't see the individual stories. But it's been really amazing to see how it's really touched a lot of people's lives. And I saw somebody said, I reviewed the video submissions.
Yeah, and yeah, Meg, thank you so much for putting so many wonderful comments in our chat room today. We have a question from Niharika. Is that a right way to pronounce your name? Please correct me. About career coach.
Hi, Deb. Thanks for the fascinating conversation. You mentioned having a career coach, and I was wondering, how did you find one, and what did that bring for you? How was that helpful in your career?
Yeah, so I never really thought to work with a career coach, and it just didn't really occur to me. But I was really struggling at work. I felt really stuck, and I was unhappy, and I was thinking about leaving. I was at Facebook for about 1.5 years, and it just wasn't, it's just things weren't right. And I remember talking to the VP I worked for at the time, and he said, I think you need a career coach. And I'm like, what? And he said, I think he explained to me all the things I was doing wrong, which he was right, except it was pretty harsh. And I said, okay, well, just, what do you think the problem is? And he's like, let me just find you the right career coach and you can just work through this. And he shared with me how a career coach helped him, and he was very gracious in sharing his story. And he has shared his story externally before, but I think that it really helped me to think that, a person cared enough, even though he and I weren't super close. He said, I'm going to help you find your way out of this feeling stuck. And so he found me a career coach. He actually handpicked her. And I was a little bit taken aback. She actually spoke at our first conference, but Katya, who's the coach, she, the first time I met her, she's like so different from me. I am super type A, checklist. She's like super touchy-feely. And in some ways, she's exactly the career coach I needed, because I think 90% of the meetings are her saying to me, what keeps you from doing the thing you already know you're supposed to be doing? So like, I'll say something like, well, I didn't really want to sign up for, this event because it was just, so much work. She's like, do you think that you should have done it? And I'm like, yes. And then she goes, well, what kept you from doing the thing you knew you were supposed to do in the first place? And it's really helpful, right? It's really helpful to have a person reflect to you what you're saying. Or she'll say to me, hey, when you talked about project X and versus Y, you just seem so much more excited by project Y. And she's like, I don't know anything about these projects. I just know you just were palatably more excited about project Y. So why are you even thinking about project X, right? And a lot of a coach is really reflecting on you, a mirror of what you're doing, what you're saying in the story you're telling. But she also corrects you when it's not, and she's like, well, are you sure that you're watching the right movie? She always says this, right? Which is like, what is the movie going on in your head? What story are you telling yourself? And so I do this talk about the power of storytelling. And the word I always say is like, what you say about yourself. It's really about like, what's the story in your head that you're telling people? That's the story. And the problem is often you're talking because you're in your head, but you're not talking to the audience, what is in their head. And so one of the things you need to do, and one thing she taught me, was how to address what is in the audience's head. Like when you're trying to sell somebody on your idea, if you're saying, well, this is my problem, solve their problem, right? If it's like, if you're talking to your director and you're trying to sell an idea, what problem are they trying to solve? Maybe they're trying to solve how to use resources better, or maybe they're trying to hit a specific goal. So you need to tell the story from their perspective, not yours. Like you might care about something, but they care about something else. And so she's really taught me a lot over the years. I'm actually, I'm writing a note about kind of what I've learned about a career coach, because I think a lot of people ask, is it worth it? It is absolutely worth it. A lot of companies will do like short coaching sessions, so you might want to consider that and ask for that. And if you don't have that, I would even say you should consider getting a few sessions of career coaching on your own, because it's really worth it to have a really good career coach can help you think through your problems, especially when you have a big decision to make. Like, for example, staying and taking a promotion, or leaving a company, or picking up a new project when you're not sure if that team is the one. It's really helpful. Someone called it a work therapist. But sometimes you really need to work through your own emotions around issues. And it has totally accelerated my career and has made my life so much easier. And so I would encourage you. I've worked with her since 2011 off and on, so not directly for the entire time, but probably we kind of do like a few months on and a few months off and a few months on over that period of time.
Yeah, I saw Lisa has a comment here. She was a co-founder at a company called HireClub.com, which is a career coaching marketplace. If the community wants to check out. So we only have 9 minutes left, and I want to make sure we get through our questions. Vivian, hi Vivian, are you here? Please unmute yourself and ask a question.
Yeah, hi, I'm here. So I have a quick follow-up question about the sponsor. I was wondering what the best way to find a right one within the company to actually support your career growth, like promotion and such. And the other question I have is basically I'm trying to find a way to personally brand myself and be known, because how I actually started with my current company, it's kind of, I started from the beginning of the COVID time. So I was literally in the office for 6 hours before the office decided to shut down and then have everybody go home. So ever since, I haven't really met too many people yet, but every day I'm trying to get there. So I was wondering if you guys have any just like suggestions for me for just that whole picture.
So I think on sponsorship, the one thing you should know about sponsorship is, this is the secret of it, is most people sponsor people just like them. Because sponsoring someone means that you're putting your reputation on the line for the success of someone else. Like if I recommended someone to run a program and it goes badly, it's on me. And by the way, that's only happened twice in all the years I've done this, and I've probably sponsored like dozens and dozens of people. So it's a rare thing but it's safer to sponsor someone who's just like you, right? And so, but that's the danger, especially, as I said, Asian women are not exactly at the top of all these companies. So you're probably not going to find an Asian woman sponsor. And so you really need to cultivate sponsors. And most of my sponsors were not even women. A lot of them were men, actually. And so it is really important that you find somebody who sees whatever, somebody said, like, someone who finds the magic in you and can see the magic in you, whatever that is, whether it's storytelling, whether it's strategy, whether it's execution, whatever it is, you need some leader that says, I see the magic in her and I'm going to support her. That's hard to find. And by the way, it's hard to you can't just ask somebody, can you be my sponsor? I can send you the note if you guys are interested. I can send a link to the notes, but I shared it in the Women in Product group if you want to search for it. But basically somebody asked about it and I actually shared the note about sponsors and mentors and how to get a sponsor. So we can look that up. But the thing that I would say is most important as you think about your career is, do you feel like you have trajectory? Do you feel like you have somebody who's like looking out for you? And I think that's really important. The second thing is, I hate the word personal brand. We say, like, don't build your brand, but find your voice. Like, what do you want to be known for? What are the things that you want people to care about? So I do a lot of things. I have a comic strip called Mommy School. If you're interested, mommyschool.net, that like is about kids. And when I joined Facebook, there were very few people with kids. Like the average age was, I don't know, like 25, and I was much older, and I had a couple of kids, and I was the only mom PM for like years before I hired the next 2 mom PMs, who were people I knew. And so one of the things that is challenging is, do you hide the difference or do you accentuate the difference? And that's a really hard choice. And I decided, this was at a time when people basically friended each other after every meeting. And I was like, oh my gosh, like they're just gonna see pictures of my kids. And so I just leaned into it. I created Mommy School, I posted, and I decided that I was gonna be special in my own way. And if people didn't like it, that's too bad. But mom discrimination, by the way, is one of the worst discriminations. So you kind of have to accept the cost of that too. But what was interesting though was so many people would read this things about my kids and they're like, that is so funny. You should write a book or you should create a comic strip. And I eventually created the comic strip. And so, what do you want to be known for? What do you want people to know that you care about? And I think each of those things really matters because it's not really about your brand, because a brand is an artificial kind of covering on you. But really, who's authentically you and what do you want people to know about you? And really finding that and being able to tell that story will be really important to your long-term, connection. Because, by the way, I would go to these meetings and people were like, I saw your last Mommy School post and it was hilarious. And the thing is, they didn't have kids. But that was something that actually broke the ice with a lot of people that probably wouldn't have spoken to me in that way. It probably wouldn't. I was actually able to build like a level of connection and intimacy at scale that I couldn't do in any other way. And so it's not, just think about the thing that you hope people know you for and be able to build around that.
Yeah, one thing I will add to that is also sometimes we want to be candid and with our managers. So for example, sometimes I just take whatever challenging projects that my manager gave me because they just give me like things that they think I can deliver well, and I do deliver well, but those are things that I probably don't want to develop my expertise. Like I actually have other projects that I really wanted to grow. And I had a career conversation with my manager last week, and then she was like, I had no idea you are not interested in these things. So if we cannot be candid with our managers, we just cannot assume they know what we're thinking about.
Well,
So
one thing I think is really dangerous is that we expect our managers to be mind readers, and they're not.
Yeah.
So one thing I say to people who report to me is like, just tell me. Like, don't assume that I'm going to know what you value, because we might. So I actually have a list of. There's actually 6 different things you can rank 1 through 6, and I do this exercise with the people on my team. So 1 through 6, it's like learning, impact, promotion, compensation. It was like promotion and title, compensation, bonus, culture, team. And I make them like rank 1 through 6, and then I make them allocate 100 points. And you can really understand, and then you actually have a conversation. And when you do that, it's really special because it helps you suss out like what you value. And so if you came to your manager and you're like, hey, here's what I value, they can help find more of that for you. But if they don't know, they're just going to guess like, oh, I think she looks like she's interested in X. And it turned out my head of design was like, I'm really interested in learning strategy. And it had never occurred to me because no other head of design had ever asked me that. And I was like, oh, do you want to join our strategy sessions where we're working on the strategies? And I said, the only condition on that is you have to hire a couple more managers because you manage all the ICs. And so he did that. And then he joined our strategy. It's been amazing. But he had never kind of worked on strategy before. So I think like him just telling me made me much more aware. I invited him and I said, look, why don't you sit in for the first 3 sessions? Then you can participate however you want to, however you feel good about it. And so it does require being much more upfront about what you want, because people can't give you what they don't know you want.
Yeah, we don't get what we don't ask for. That's something that I always remember. We have 2 minutes left. I have one more question for you, Deb. If you're not a product leader and money talent is not a problem, what would you be doing?
That's a good question. I mean, I love advising startups. So I might be investor, or I actually I'm advising a few startups right now, just on the side. The other thing is I would write. I really enjoy writing. My husband hates it, even though he was like the editor of the law school journal at Harvard. But I was like, you actually write for a living? And he goes, that's why I don't want to write, because I write contracts for a living. But I enjoy writing. The act of getting words on paper, I find it helps me think. And I don't publish like most of what I write, but it helps me think a lot. And then I really enjoy the comic strip because it's something I do with the kids and they think it's really funny. And so you can see the comic strip as well, because it's just a lot of the things, even when I read the old comic strips, I forgot it happened. And so, a lot of times when you write things down, it helps you remember your past. It remembers, you also see how far you've come too. So I think it's been really useful. So I'd love to do any of those things.
That's awesome. Speaking of which, can you remind us the name of your book?
Oh,
or do you have
Take
a
Back Your
name
Power
already? Take Back Your Power. Awesome.
And thanks for sharing the note about sponsors. I posted in there. It's a Google Doc. So if you want to take a look, the post ID is in there. And then if you go to the comments, I commented as one of the posts. I just haven't published it externally yet, although I'll probably do that at some point. I just need to clean it up a little bit. I just haven't quite had time, but hopefully we'll be able to share that.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you so much, Deb, for giving us your wisdom and your time tonight.
Picture. So everybody turn on your camera. Do a picture. So we always do a Zoom picture.
Deb's favorite picture time.
All right, everybody, let me see if I can. Okay, excellent. Okay, so I think everyone turn on your monitor. Okay, we'll wait for all the video to come in. It's amazing to see all of you from all different places in the world. Do we have the video on for most people? Okay, I think, let's see.
Yeah, I think so.
Okay, great. Here we go. Let's see. Okay.
You must have a folder of all the Zoom screenshots.
Let me see if that works. Okay, I have one. Okay, I'm gonna take the other screen. So smile. Okay, great. Thank you so much, everybody. It was really wonderful.
Thanks so much, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Let's give Deb a virtual clap, everyone, if you're still here.